Portland, where he works tirelessly to empower Black people in a very white city, and especially to bridge the gap between the police and the Black community. This Is Not For You is his story. Also joining us this evening is Mr. Brown's partner in writing this book, Portland author Brian Benson. Originally from Wisconsin, Mr. Benson teaches writing at the Attic Institute and is the author of the memoir Going Somewhere. And finally, joining Misters Brown and Benson in conversation tonight is our very own Eloise Doubleday. Ms. Doubleday is a Portland native, a Hamilton College graduate, and a Broadway bookseller. She is an avid reader who dabbles in writing and is passionate about this book and about the need for young people to step up. And with that, I will turn the mic over to Eloise.
Gotta unmute myself to start. Hi. Was just going to start with my kind of, I guess, introduction overview of the book. I read this when it first came out. But I guess in the recent sense, kind of the uprising, I don't know if uprising is the right word, but last summer when kind of Black Lives Matter came to the forefront, it was really brought to my attention how privileged and I guess sheltered like I've been up until this point, and thinking that I've been relatively woke when I've been pretty lucky. So I've been making a big effort to be reading a lot of different things, and this book really caught my attention because it's Portland specific, and I'm proud of Portland. I love being from Portland. I think it's an awesome city, but obviously also we have a very complicated and not great history. So this book is really interesting. And then Mr. Brown has worked in like with the Portland police and communities of color, and like bridging that gap, which is also a very tense relationship. And so hearing about like how he's done that and been able to do that work in ways that we can continue to do it is really inspiring. And I've read a lot, but I'm looking for ways to be better and more active in the community. Reading is a great first step. I have a lot to learn, but there's a lot of steps after that. This book has been really helpful for that too. So I really like this book. If you haven't read it yet, you should read it. But I was going to kind of start the discussion by I want to hear a little bit just kind of how it came into being, technically speaking, how you co-write a memoir. Obviously, this is Mr. Brown's story, but Brian, you've also played a large role in the writing of this book. So I'm curious how that all happened. And then also we hear a lot about Mr. Brown's like journey, and I want to know a little bit about Brian's as well, and kind of how you came into this work.
Mr. Brown, you want to go first and then I can jump in?
Well, thank you very much for that, and welcome to the folks who are here. I, for years, have been asked about writing my adventures down. I like to talk about them, and I guess people feel that the stories haven't changed in all the years I've been telling them, so they must have some truth to them. And when I started doing the activist work, one of the complaints that I usually get, that we usually hear, is that there's no communications between the new and the old folks doing this work. And one incident that really brought it home to me was down at the police academy. I do a presentation at the graduations for the families of new police. And I talk to them about the role that they play in keeping their officer grounded, you know, and their responsibility to keep them grounded. Because if they have a lot of issues at home and away from the job, that stuff creeps into the work, and ultimately it impacts the way they deal with people. And at the end of one of those presentations, a youngster who had come up here from California to see a family member certified chased me down and told me that he wanted to do what I did. He's about 16 years old, so I was real happy to talk to him, but I didn't know what to tell him. And I think that was one of the few times that I was lost for words. You know, I thought maybe he wanted to be a cop. He said, no, I just want to do what you do. And I don't even remember what I told him, but I felt it wasn't sufficient. And then I started on this journey about writing this stuff down so somebody would kind of have a path that they could follow. A checklist is what I wanted to do. You know, in the military, we have checklists for everything, you know, and that got me through 20 years using those checklists. And I thought, well, that's what we need to do, get 5 or 10 pages of information to pass on to somebody. Just carry them in my pocket and just hand them out like cough drops. And I didn't know where to start. So I would talk to people, you know, and drop the hints. You know, I'm thinking about doing this. And nobody said, oh, Richard, let me give you a hand. That never happened. And this went on for years. And finally, I was speaking to a guy that had a project that he was working on Alberta. And he invited me to talk to him because I had some concerns about the way they were doing what they were doing. And in the small talk, I brought up the idea of doing a checklist. And I think he called me and asked if it was all right for him to give my information. And a couple of days later, I got a call from Brian. And we made arrangements to meet for lunch. And we went to a restaurant, a Jordanian restaurant that was on MLK. And we sat there through the lunch hour. I think we talked for like 3 hours, you know. And when we decided it was time, you know, we'd meet again, Brian had said, well, you know, I'm like 95% there. So I said, well, let's sit down. Let's continue this conversation. And we did. And we left agreeing that we were going to attempt to do this. And I mean, it was unexpected for me. And I don't think that there's been a week that's gone by that we haven't talked. And before it was published, we talked frequently, you know, and, you know, it's just been, for me, a great relationship. And it's even better because of the feedback we've been getting on the book. So, you know, I always need to give him his props anytime I can, and especially in a public way. You know, it was, I had no idea what writing a book was like. And I figured, you know, to do a checklist, it shouldn't take much time. And it took us 4 years, roughly 4 years to do this. And it doesn't seem like 4 years. I guess it, you know, or to me, you know, all I had to do was talk. So for me, it wasn't like 4 years, but the time went by fast, and it was an enjoyable project for me. And it was emotionally for times, because there were times that in telling my story, things came out that I had overlooked, and they were valuable things. They were important things. They were things about my family. And there were things I didn't get to let my folks know about. And, you know, that was kind of hard. And because of that, you know, I think everybody needs to at least talk to their folks. You know, don't let anybody leave without letting them know that everything is fine. You know, it was so bad that I went to see somebody that he didn't lay me on the couch, but we sat down in soft chairs and talked about how I was feeling. And it really didn't do any good. So I think those couches and those guys and women who do that stuff are highly overrated, as far as I'm concerned. And I called my brother, and I was really having a rough time with it. And he said, Richie, don't worry about it. Mom and Dad had good eyes. They could see in the dark. And I don't know where he got that from, but it lifted, you know, I was able to stand straight up, you know, no bends in my back, no aches, no pains. So, you know, the one thing I think everybody should do is take care of your business before you lose people. I'm through.
Thank you for all that. And Ellie, I want to thank you again for reading the book and for asking us here, and thank Broadway for having us to have this conversation. I'll keep my remarks as quick as I can because I'd love just more space for Mr. Brown to tell some more of his stories. But my side of that story that Mr. Brown just told is, yeah, I got a text message from a friend who said that he had met somebody, about an 80-year-old Black man who had been doing a lot of work, a lot of activism for decades, specifically around police. And he wanted to know if I could help him out with writing something. And he didn't know what that something was going to be. And my thought was, probably not, but I mean, I can meet up with him at least, and we can talk for a little bit, and maybe I can direct him somewhere else, because I'm a white guy from Nowhere, Wisconsin, who wrote a book about a bike trip, which doesn't exactly feel like the prime qualifications to help get his story down on the page. But yeah, we had that lunch, and I'd leading up to that, this is early 2017, and I think a lot of white people in this country at that point was just thinking a lot about how can I use my positioning, my privilege, this whatever skills I have to do a little bit to fight against just the rampant injustice, and particularly in the context of what it felt like to be a person in this country in early 2017. And so that I didn't know what it meant to do that, but getting put in touch with Mr. Brown felt like a chance to, maybe use whatever storytelling skills I had to try to help get his story down on the page. So yeah, after that first meeting, after the first maybe like 28 meetings, neither of us really knew exactly what it was we were getting into, but that every lunch was kind of 3 hours. We met every week for several years. And I think it was 7 or 8 months probably before we even started writing anything. It was just listening, taking down his stories, recording them, transcribing them, which went very slowly because I've never done any of this before and I'm terrible at it. But, just getting all the quotes and all the stories that felt like they were really resonant, and starting to figure out what a story would look like from that. And eventually we came on the structure of the book that has kind of these two different parallel storylines, one in the sort of present tense with Mr. Brown doing what he does in Portland and down in Salem, and then the other kind of catching up on how his life brought him to where he is right now. In terms of just the process of writing it, I mean, it's so hard to say this briefly because it was years and years of work, but it was so much sustained work to try to do what I think this is also Mr. Brown's brother said about how the book ended up feeling, and this is what we were trying to do is make it feel sort of like I was a stage manager. If this is a theatrical performance and I'm adjusting the lights and the sound and moving the sets around in the background, and maybe like changing where the spotlight is focused, but Mr. Brown is standing at the microphone the whole time. And so it was a lot of figuring out how to get out of the way, a lot of remembering how Mr. Brown speaks and listening to him a bunch and trying to get my voice out of there, which is the thing Mr. Brown helped me with a lot when we were in revision, pointing out all the times that I swore that he would never swear because he's not profane. He said at some point that I've been watching a little bit too much Shaft. And then also pointing out things that were maybe less obvious, the ways that my privilege seeped in. I'd write emotional reactions for his character into the book that actually weren't correct for him, and they were more about me and the way that I thought that I would have responded to something. And I mentioned whiteness in there more than I should have because Eloise, like you, I think a lot about my privilege and my position and how whiteness affects the way I move through the world, which is really useful for me, but it's not useful when I'm writing from the perspective of an 82-year-old Black man. Then I'm just centering whiteness in a place where it doesn't need to be there. So in the writing, I just tried to keep his voice in my head. And then in the revision, it was just a lot of conversation. I mean, we probably went through, it's hard to say a specific number for revisions, but a lot of revision, and just getting it as close as possible to really feeling like it is fully Mr. Brown's voice and story. And again, like I'm just scurrying around in the background, adjusting the things that need to be adjusted. And just to speak to the partnership as well, I never could have expected that this was this book and that my friendship with Mr. Brown was going to come into my life. And I've learned so much, as anybody who reads this book will learn, about history, about activism, about art, but also just about friendship and collaboration. I think, Mr. Brown said that he had no idea what it took to write a book. And I had no idea what it took to build and sustain a partnership like this. And I think he has spent his entire life building partnerships with people who come from very different backgrounds. And it's been a real lesson for me. And I'm just so grateful to have gotten to do this with him. I am through now.
There's a quote in here on page 181 that I highlighted when I was reading it, about working with a Quaker group, where they recognized what this was, a Black issue, and who they were, white people looking to help. And so overall, we worked real well together. And that, I feel like, also sums up this really well also. Like there's a thing that's being talked about here, and we are helping, but sideline, like stage manager, like you were saying, which I thought was really cool. The next question I have is about the title of the book. This is not for you. I want you to expand on it a little bit more, Mr. Brown. Like obviously, or maybe not obviously, I see it a lot as a metaphor for kind of being Black in a world that's made for whiteness, right? Our entire society is built on a white reference point. And so a lot of things have that kind of connotation of like, this is for me, but it's not for you. And most obviously it came up with the play Tea and Symphony, where your teacher brought it up and was like, this isn't a book, you're not going to like it, I'm just going to leave it here. And so of course you're going to read it. But I kind of wanted you to expand more on the theme and then how you kind of arrived at this as the title for the book.
Well, you pretty much summed it up. And we may have to come up with some system, because I talk and I have no limits. When I was a baby, my first vaccination was done with a record player needle. So you have to get my attention some way. The title of the book, the piece about the teacher, it was when I was in high school in English, we were talking about Broadway plays, and Tea and Sympathy was a big play back in the, and she brought in the edition. She had seen the play the night before, I think, and she brought in some editions of the magazine that they had copied the play in, and the text. And she put them on desk, and we had the lesson. We talked about it, and near the end, she said, "There's some copies." I think it was Playbill magazine. There's some copies of Playbill magazine on the table, and I mean nonchalantly, just like she was just throwing words in the air, but it's not for you all. So my instinct was, how can she think she can tell me what I can do? And that happened real fast, because I was the first one to the table to get a book, right? And I read the book, and I never understood how you could read a play anyway, because you've got the character, and then you've got what they're supposed to say. So that never made any sense to me. So I never was interested in reading one for pleasure. And when I started thinking about doing the book, that from the beginning, that was the title I wanted to use. And the idea was, my feeling about communication was that in this situation, the cops don't want to hear nothing you have to say if you're not a cop. And your hair is too gray if you're talking to youngsters. So I said, well, they are probably just as obstinate as I am. So I'm going to try this on them. This is not for you is the name of the book. So when people ask, a couple of weeks ago, somebody asked, somebody told him about the book and he wanted to order, so he wanted to know what the name of it was. I said, well, this is not for you. And just threw it out there. And he looked at me. And the guy that was with me said, no, that's the name of the book. So, but he took it seriously. Not for me, are you serious? But that's the way the book title came about.
I like that. That's really fun, actually, to be able to throw it around like that. Mm-hmm. On a kind of similar vein of this is not for you and a white world that we kind of live in. One of the themes that I found really interesting in the book, obviously you're a photographer, really incredible pictures, but you come back to again and again this idea of, or not idea, but learning curve of exposing photographs for Black skin. And I mean, I took film photography for a semester in high school, but I mean, like you're saying, it's a white world and we're not taught how to expose for anything else. And it made me think about things like foundation for women, where they all come in a lot of shades of like super pale white to tan. And then there's two shades darker than that. And the idea of like a flesh colored Band-Aid being my skin color and nude tights are all white and stuff. And just kind of this idea of a lot of what I take for granted as a normal thing is totally centered on my whiteness. And thought that was like kind of an interesting topic for conversation.
Well, you know, I think generally if you're taking pictures and dark colors are in the picture, you may not notice that they may be a little underexposed. You know, there may not be any detail. But when you're taking pictures of people with eyes, mouth, nose, and you want people to see that, you got to figure out a way to do it. And I don't know that it's novel. It was difficult for me because I did not realize it. In fact, I never even gave it any thought until I took an Ansel Adams workshop and started working with a large format camera. And then I realized I can control this. And then doing that, I was more successful in taking pictures. So.
And just the whole idea that it's not taught, right? That it's assumed that our subjects will be white, so we don't need to think about that when we go about taking our pictures.
Yeah, I think when you look at the zone system, well, it may have changed now. I think I have seen one where they do say dark colored skin versus white skin. So they're keeping up with the times there. So.
A little bit behind, but we're getting there. I guess changing subjects, but kind of what I was touching on in my introduction about Portland and Oregon, and I was born and raised here. I want to be able to be proud of my city, but the history that we hold. So you talk about Black education. You've obviously done a lot of work with youth groups in a number of different ways, but also centering education around Black lives, not just history, but math and science, all of the other subjects that, and we have Black History Month and everything else is still relatively white. So like that was, I mean, it's an interesting point. It's a lot of work that we need to do, but I'm also then curious about how kind of we can move forward. It's a funny, awkward line of Portland's history in that we need to acknowledge it, but also move forward productively. That's an interesting kind of gray area to be in. And again, another quote from page 181 that I pulled was, we weren't living under apartheid, but we were Black in Oregon. And that's incredibly profound, especially being somebody who's grown up white in Oregon, right? I had a very different experience, and just how I and how the rest of us can hold our history productively and move forward and be better.
And you know, Black history is American history. You know, it's not like it's not like this stuff happens in a vacuum. But you know, people feel like if I got to make room for Black history, and I might have to give up something. You know, or it goes against what I learned. So I'm not the giant, the mental giant I thought I was, because this new stuff is coming along. You know, and I mean, you know, one of the most obvious indications that it's got to change is around Christmas time, when everybody's getting psyching the youngsters around Santa Claus. And you take them to the mall and there's a white Santa Claus there and the child starts crying, or the parents won't let the child sit on the Black Santa Claus, or the Black Santa Claus is Santa's helper. You know, that's sick. That's sick. You know, we take a figment of the imagination anyway, and we poison young minds with it, you know. And you know, it's difficult to have the conversation, I think, because people personalize it. You know, if I want to talk about slaves, I'm not saying that you own slaves, you know, so why do we have to go there? You didn't have anything to do with it, so why should I have to give up something? And then when you try to tell someone that, well, you know, this is what my history has been. And then I hear, well, I grew up and I didn't have a television either, and I didn't have a meal every day. You know, it's not about you, you know, and if you want to compare something, then compare your history with my history. Then you'll find out that there's some differences. But people are so hung up on thinking that they're gonna have to give up something, you know, equal opportunity. They came up with a system that allowed folks to make up for the fact that Black folks were eliminated from a lot of things that went on in this country. So to help balance the scales, we're going to do a little more. And right away, I didn't get the job because they gave it to a Black person. Never thinking, you know, that the Black person might have been smarter than you are, might have been able to do the job better than you are, than you have. You know, when I was growing up, and I think you can go to any Black person in this country, especially if they're my age. And one of the things that our parents talked to us about getting old and education in the United States, you have to be twice as good as white folks. So when they decided they're gonna give us a chance, we came to the table twice in our minds better than you were. Mm-hmm. You know, but that never enters their mind. You know, it's all about taking something from them, and nobody's asking you to give up anything. You know, it didn't bother you when lives were being taken, Black lives were being taken, when Black lives were being snatched from their mothers, Black babies were being snatched from their mothers and fathers, and when Black lives were being stuck in the bottom of boats and put on a 4-month journey from Africa to the United States. That didn't bother anybody, you know. So, you know, people have got to understand, you know, we talk about empathy, but we choose what we're going to be empathetic about. You know, the empathy goes out the window when we talk about the conditions that Black folks have been in. You know, people are quick to comment about how the country is in an uproar since George Floyd. Well, George Floyd was the last time they were in an uproar. The bigger problem was, the bigger situation was that white people who were on the line, who when Rodney King got beat up, oh, he shouldn't have been speeding. He asked for it. He did this, he did that. You know, not the fact that speeding doesn't get you beat up. You know, passing a phony bill, if he did that, doesn't get you killed. There's no death sentence about that. But they got to see that cop sit there. And I tell folks, to make his face meaningful, go online and look at the pictures of lynchings. Those cops in Minnesota, their face fits right in that crowd, that blank stare, that so what stare, that I can get away with this stare. You look at that, and that needs to impact you. You need to understand that when Black folks say this has been going on, it didn't start with Floyd. It's been going on. And when you talk about trauma, these things have traumatized Black folks forever, and it doesn't go away. It does not go away. You know, I was talking to some folks about if you think Black folks are mad at you, then when they have the information as they had last week on Tulsa, look at that. Look at that. That's why Black folks are mad at you. Because the whole community, Black, white, cops, the butcher, the baker, the candlestick, they all were involved in it. And they took pictures afterwards with their trophies. You know, so if people want to say, well, the cops didn't have anything to do with it, well, they had those pictures. when the folks were downtown rioting, they had pictures and they used those pictures to bring cases against them. Now, all of the people that are photographed at lynchings in this country, not one of them was ever brought to trial. The man that got lynched in Oregon that we don't talk about much. Everybody knew about it. They didn't go to trial. You know, so we need to stop personalizing this stuff. You know, let my story be the thing that makes you think about what went on. Don't tell me about what you have or have not had, because it doesn't mean anything to me, and I have little sympathy for hearing it, especially given the response I get when I talk about the things that Black folks have been through. You know, and I try to do it often, and I want them to say, well, so I can tell them it's not about you.
Bringing us back nicely to the title of the book.
Oh. We called it, when I was in college, the Stress Olympics. But I think in this case, the Oppression Olympics.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you're going to complain, well, I have it worse than you.
Yeah.
Therefore, you're not oppressed, or therefore I understand, or whatever your point is, which is utterly unhelpful.
Yeah.
It also, what you were talking about was making me think about, there's a Faulkner book, Intruder in the Dust, which I read for school. And one of the takeaways that my professor left us all with is like taking ownership for your whole community, your whole race. That it's really easy for me as a white person who's liberal to say, well, I'm liberal. Like those other white people, like that wasn't me. I didn't do that. I don't need to take ownership for that. I don't need to handle that or think about it. And it is me, right? I'm complicit in all of it. I am a white person. This is my history. I can't step aside from that and pretend that I don't have any part in that because I think I'm liberal. And
you know, somebody recently told me that the book comes out at a good time. In 1939, when I was born, it was a good time. The same things were going on. So it didn't just become a good time. You know, we've been able to ignore it. And, you know, people talk about the fact that Portland is looks like a third world country now. I don't care. When North and Northeast Portland looked like a third world country, nobody ran over here concerned about it. You know, and, you know, people are mad at the cops because they didn't do anything to stop it. Well, they didn't do anything to stop it because the people who were down there were white folks. They were the children. They were the children of some of those cops, probably. They were their friends. They were children of folks in the high rent district, high real estate areas. They were mothers and fathers that don't live in Northeast Portland. You know, so when you start shooting like they do when there are only dark faces out there, you're gonna shoot some white folks, and you're gonna play hell for doing that. You know, they're not gonna sit by and just say, well, you were downtown rioting. You know, white folks were lied to, and they realize it. Young people were lied to. They were lied to by their teachers, by their parents, by the city, by the country, and they realize it. They got to see what Black folks have been talking about for years. And there's still folks that are not sure. So anyway.
I mean, in a similar vein with Northeast and North Portland and stuff, it's where I live now. It's one of the most heavily gentrified sections of Portland. And it's, I mean, there are streets, right? Alberta now, at least amongst my relatively white group of friends, is really cute, and it's a fun shopping street, and there's a lot of fun restaurants on it. And how we kind of own that, or reframe our thinking about that it's a fun street, but at what cost? right? And gentrification that took place there, and again, owning that history and how to move forward, right? I mean, is boycotting Alberta productive? Is supporting Black-owned businesses more productive? LGBTQ, small independent businesses, kind of ways to move forward from that in a positive manner.
You know, everybody's got a Black Lives Matter sign. If Black Lives Matter, when I go in your shop, I want to see a black face in there then, if Black Lives Matter. You know, Black Lives Matter, you know, during the Rodney King riots, all the, a lot of the shops used to put Soul Brother in their window. That kept your windows from getting broken. Black Lives Matter is the new Soul Brother sign now. You know, everybody, and that's not to say that they're not people who have the signs that really believe that. But for a lot of folks, it's window dressing. Maybe you won't throw a rock through my window because I have the sign. I'm sorry.
Performative activism, just
yeah.
contributing.
You know, and you know, a lot of Black folks put blood, sweat, and white folks put blood, sweat, and tears into trying to make North and Northeast Portland a better place to live. Blood, sweat, and tears. And as gentrification does, it lets a neighborhood deteriorate. And then when the property owner or the bank or the real estate folks say, well, we need that, the cops come down there and they clean it up in no time, You know, and then you have new people coming there. I can remember speaking to or listening to new people to the community. A lot of them were coming from California at the time, but some of them were from here. Oh, I want my child to grow up in a integrated neighborhood. Don't have a clue about who their neighbors are. You know, and when the house next door is for sale, they call their friends to let their friends know about it. You know, they know about all the good deals in the property, but they're not passing it on to Black folks. You know, so, you know, it's aggravating because this gentrification thing happens the same way all over this country. I'm from Harlem, and it happened the same way in Harlem. You walk down 125th Street in Harlem, and folks look at you with their little dogs looking at you like, what are you doing here? You know, it makes me angry when I go there, but you know, I love it. I go there because there's still Black folks there that are not leaving, you know, but you know, it's just terrible the way for us to be so concerned about what happens in other countries, what happens to other people, that we treat our people the way we do. You know, all the money we spend in these countries, if they spent part of it to make sure that we had a better education system in Black communities, that we had better job training opportunities for Black folks. You know, and don't tell me about the youngsters out there shooting themselves, shooting each other. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it, you know, because when you throw people together, the fittest survive. You know, and it's no different than people who are oppressed. That happens all over the world. And we need to stop trying to get out of our responsibilities by parroting that foolishness.
Kind of have one final moving forward question, and then we have a lot of really good questions in the Q&A coming in, so we can move into those. But I mean, moving forward from here, I mean, you spend a lot of time in the book kind of about how change happens, and it's not a fast process, it's slow, and there's a lot of work that's put in to it. And I mean, personally, like, I have a hard time with it. I love instant gratification. I like buying things right now and then having it in my hand, and I like easy 1, 2, 3 steps to get something done. And I mean, you talk a lot about celebrating small victories, right? And throwing a party when something is accomplished, and maintaining the hope and stuff. So kind of some advice for that. And then thinking about where we are now. Obviously, this book did come out recently, but you guys have spent so long working on it, and there's a lot of hope and a lot of, I guess, despair, not despair, but some despair about also kind of where we're moving. And I mean,
Mhm.
it's waves and there's big pushes and everybody's really into it and it's the hot new
Mhm.
topic, and then it fades from the headlines.
Right.
We keep moving. And I guess, yeah, advice, this has come up in the chat also on how to move forward, how to keep up that hope, how we keep going.
Well, you know, there are a lot of folks out there today that are doing things. And it's not the big things that make the change. It's a lot of people doing little things. You know, if all you do is under your roof, you educate the people that you live with that are close to you about these issues, and be truthful about it. Be truthful about it. Forget about what somebody told you. Find out for yourself. You know, talk to somebody. I'm not the one to talk to because sometimes I feel like I have a zipper in my chest. You know, somebody asks you a question and you unzipper your chest and you throw all this stuff on the table, and people get to paw through it and boo-hoo about it. And then when it's over, you zip up and they go off and continue to do things that they were doing before. And I'm tired of it. I know other people are tired of it. You know, people know what to do. People know what to do. You know, if your child wasn't getting a good education, what would you do? That's what you do for folks in this community. You know, if folks aren't working and you've got an employment system and you're making money off of black, hire them. Hire them. All over this city. People come in here with contracts to put up these big buildings. And I don't see very many black folks out there. You know, I remember when one of the issues that came up when Tektronix, I think, came here. I'm not 100% certain of the circumstances, but I know that they got some credits, or they had to go through the mayor to get it, whatever it was they got. And one of the things she did was, you got to supply training so that black folks can work at Tektronix. Tektronix did not pull out. Tektronix went out to Washington County and they set up a training situation. I went out there, and one of the problems was that because all the black folks live in Portland, nobody was going out there. Did Tektronix say, no, well, we put it out here, they didn't want to do it. They set up a training situation at PCC, North Portland. Now, why can't we make those demands of everybody that comes here and gets a tax dollar to work, gets a tax break to work? Why can't we do that? Why can't every house downtown, every building downtown have black folks in meaningful jobs? Meaningful jobs. You know, we've got training programs over here for the construction field. You would think that their doors would be torn down trying to find people to work. But strangely enough, that doesn't happen. You know, because I know somebody that's a minority, and that's all they ask for, a minority. I'm not asking for a minority. I'm asking for somebody black. You know, because that's been the history. You know, we allow everybody to get on the float while we're pulling it. And then when we get where we're going, the float is empty because everybody else got taken care of, and we still pulling the float. You know, that's got to change. That's got to change. People need not be afraid of saying, I'm doing this because we need to help black folks get these positions. And nobody's looking to be given anything. You know, folks, I don't know how many people Tektronix hired, but the folks that got those jobs went to work for it. I know folks who go through these construction programs and get good jobs. Nobody wants to be given anything. They want a chance at getting them just like everybody else. You know, when you don't teach a child in the 4th grade, and we know that the sociologists use the 4th grade to determine how many prison beds we need. We use the literacy rate to determine how many beds we need in the prison down the road. Why can't we figure out a way to make it the 5th grade, and then the 6th grade, and then the 7th grade, and then college? How come we can't raise the table, raise the ceiling? You know, they've been using the 4th grade, 3rd grade for years, for years. I'd forgotten about it until recently. I heard it again. You know, so we know how to do this stuff. We choose not to. We choose not to. And we, you know, that's got to change. You know, people think Black folks are mad. With all of the things that have happened to Black folks, if they were mad, you'd have to find another planet to live on. So people are, you know, Black folks are forgiven. I mean, they are loving people, you know. And the proof of it is, no matter how bad you say they are, nobody's running around shooting people. No, Black people anyway are running around. Let me not even say that. Not many are running around shooting people just because they're white. Now we can't say that as about the people who are supposed to be afraid. Every day, we find out that some person of color has been shot by somebody, some racist, some white supremacist. All the time. And we make excuse, oh, they got mental problems. Oh, they got this. Oh, they got that. They mad because they got fired. If Black folks were mad because they were fired, there wouldn't be no jobs nowhere, because they've always been the last hired and the first fired. You know, so I'm sorry.
No, I apologize. In terms of, I mean, racist is a word that we all shy away from. We don't want to be called racist. One of our questions from the audience is challenged with the whole liberal leaning is that some of the most virulent, can't pronounce that word, racists are liberal and totally dismiss the need to see their implicit guilt, let alone change. Would you please share your perspective on how this keeps Portland so unwelcoming?
And, you know, and it's not only Portland, you know, it's Portland because I'm here, and you know, they've got so much attention for other things that it's real easy to, well, I thought y'all were so weird. You know, I thought y'all did this, I thought y'all did that. Well, now the covers are being pulled back. There are a lot of other things that go on here. You know, that happen you know, we're quick to recognize the problems in New York and in California. Yeah, they have these problems. They got them right here. They got them right here. You know, nobody wants to talk about that. You know, so you know, we've been having this gun violence here, and in the 90s, Boston was also having trouble with gun violence, and they came up with a way that reduced, I want to say, the number of people that got killed. I'm going to say number of people that were shot for 18 months to zero. And they did it by putting services in place to deal with folks, but by putting POs and police in the same car. And I was listening to NPR last week. And in Sweden, they're doing the same thing. There's a city in Sweden whose gun violence rate in Sweden is going up. This is a world problem, that's not Portland. The gun violence problem in Sweden has gone up. And there's a town there, Malmo, I don't know. They were able in 3 years to reduce their gun violence significantly. And when they were talking about it on NPR, I thought they talked about having these combination of people who deal with these situations, collaborating on making a difference. You know, we want to study everything. Everything needs a doggone study. We don't need to study nothing. We know the answers. We just need to do it. We need to do it. And we need to hold people accountable that don't do the right thing.
I mean, the research has already been done.
Yeah.
All over the place.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a lot of kind of the fuel behind the defund the police.
Mm-hmm.
And also, right, there's so much money funneled into the police, and there's so many other people that are better equipped to handle so many of these situations.
Yeah.
Right, that having a different group of people in the car can make a huge difference.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I remember the time when there was a requirement to have people in the car, but they never get called. Or in some instances, they didn't get called. Let me not say never. There were a lot of instances where they didn't get called. And there's no reason for that. There's no reason for that. It's almost like people want things to be crazy so they can ask for more money. And then they don't do nothing. That's the reason everything is happening. When there were no shootings, why weren't we dealing with those things then? We wait till it gets out of hand, and then we wring our hands because we don't know, we can't do anything because. And we always know why we can't do it. We just don't ever do anything about it. Community policing was a good vehicle to deal with these things. And we don't do community policing because that's touchy-feely stuff. I didn't come on the police force to kiss babies and hug dogs. Times have changed. Jobs have changed. It takes fewer people to do a lot of these jobs now. So you got to work better.
Just kind of wrapping it up. It's been just about an hour, but like reception of the book, what have you guys been hearing? How's it been reading?
I didn't hear you, Ellen.
Sorry, too quiet. How's the reception of the book been?
Great. I'm glad you asked because I was getting in some bad soup there. It's been great. I think because I've been so involved in so many things that I didn't realize or I didn't think was important, that people find things in there that impacts their lives, and the young people I've talked to, I was kind of cynical about young folks just because, they, like old folks, they come around and they want information as long as it rubber stamps what they want to do. And that's fine. You ask me what I think and I tell you, and you don't have to do anything with it. You can throw it in the trash. You can come to me the next day and I'll talk to you again. But, I think that forces that feeling about communications among activists. But the young people that have talked to me about the book, they ask a question and that they're not looking for a news flash. That they're asking a question about something that impacts their lives. And I love that. I think the opportunities to do things better are close. I just don't think there's a will to do it faster. It's almost, and the reason things take so long is, we've got to fight for money. So you spend the money you got, then you got to start fighting again. So there's always something to keep you distracted, like Floyd, we're distracted now. We don't hear a lot about Black Lives Matter. We hear about the torn up buildings in downtown Portland. We talk about the garbage on the street. So the priority now is getting people back to work, getting restaurants serving people, getting the wood taken off the doors downtown. And then by the time everything gets back to normal, will we still remember George Floyd? will that still be a priority for us? That's not our history. That's not our history. You know, the same things were said about Rodney King. That's not our history, because now we got George Floyd. And if we don't start doing something different, there's going to be somebody else. And I'm not I try to stay on the positive side, but people are getting tired of this. People are getting tired of it. Yeah, I guess that's all I want to say about that.
To end on a more positive note, this book is inspiring. I've been inspired by it. I think everybody should read it. I have high hope for my generation. You can be cynical about us, that's fair, but I do think our eyes are opening more.
Well, and I believe you. I believe you. I am 1,000% supportive of young folks today. And some of the old folks. I think a lot of them are just preparing for that journey. When they get to the pearly gate, they want to have something nice to say about themselves. Or they want the preacher to have something nice to say about them. So gotta have some humor.
A lifetime of work, then I'll have lots of good things said about me. So there.
I'm going to take this opportunity now. Kim Bissell from Broadway Books, and I just want to thank you all so much for being here tonight. I think this has been my favorite event of the year, and I'm so honored that all three of you are here tonight to share how you were moved by the book, about sharing your stories, Mr. Brown and Mr. Benson. Thank you for helping him get this onto paper. I'm so honored that we have this book in Portland, and honored that you three were here tonight. You can find more information about the book at our website, broadwaybooks.net. We've shared some links in the chat of Mr. Brown's photographs from the book, and we can share that with you at the store if you didn't catch it tonight at the Zoom. And I just want to thank you all for coming. So a huge round of applause that you can't hear, but I know everyone in the audience is incredibly thankful for your time and your stories, Mr. Brown. And thank you, Eloise, for guiding us tonight. And thank you, thank you, thank you.
Well, I want to thank Eloise also. I appreciate your struggling through this. I appreciate you trying to corral me, but I'm sorry, but I appreciate, again, everything you've said about the book. Again, young people, they are the future. We got to treat them well. So thank you. And Brian, my brother from another mother. Thank you again.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you so much, Eloise.
Thank you. Read the book, everyone.